When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
Welcome back to Draftvice, everybody. I am here. We are doing this again. And let's just get down to brass tacks. The draft is a few days away. So I'm cranking out a couple of looking future episodes. But I might mix them up with some profiles of some players. Like today's episode is going to be quarterbacks in the NFL draft. A couple of the ones that might go in the day 1, day 2 range. And then we're also going to have a little bit of a chat about a couple of teams, a couple of famous teams, probably two of the most famous teams in the NFL, right? We're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys and the Miami Dolphins, everybody. The Miami Dolphins, they are going to be a big star of this draft. They might not have the number 1 pick. It don't matter. They are going to be a star in this draft. So, good team to go over. They've been crazy in free agency. They've been crazy with all the draft stuff, and we're going to get into why in a second. But first, before we break down any quarterbacks, before we get into the Dolphins, let's just kick the Dallas Cowboys out of the way. That way we could go over a little bit of they're crazy, right? They got a new head coach, right? Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy, formerly of the Green Bay Packers, Super Bowl winning head coach. It looks like they were looking to go ahead and get a guy who was a seasoned veteran. Like, there was a way to make sure, like, they don't do rebuilds in Dallas. They don't believe in that anymore. They go, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and get the best guy on the market, who we believe is the best guy on the market. And I don't think that was a bad move. I was impressed with McCarthy's off-season or on-season or whatever he was doing, the interviews. I was impressed by those interviews that he gave. I think those were some good letters to people to tell them, like, hey, come check us out. McCarthy knows what he's doing. You should pick him to be your next head coach. And Dallas did not let him get out of the room. He slept over Jerry Jones' house. Yes, I know I'm still bringing that shit up because I thought that was kind of weird. I think it's kind of weird when you sleep over your new boss's house or your prospective boss. I mean, he probably wasn't, like, they weren't having a slumber party. They probably weren't playing canasta in, like, Jerry Jones's bedroom. Maybe they were. I don't know. I'm not aware of how big of a fan of canasta. I feel like Jerry Jones's game is Monopoly. Anyway, so we got the Dallas Cowboys. We got Mike McCarthy coming in. He kept Kellen Moore, who was the offensive coordinator last year. So there seems to be a little bit of synergy, but also a little bit of, like, hey, can you, like, keep it? So he kept the guy on, and he kept the guy on that they felt comfortable with. Kellen Moore might be a superstar in the NFL one day as far as coaching. He showed a little bit of good props last year with Jason Garrett as a head coach, but there seemed to be a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of pull, if you will. So one week the offense would look great, the other weeks the offense would look blah, 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 if you will. That's an official term. Blah, blah, blah. So I like the Kellen Moore move to keep him on because you don't know. We saw some good offense earlier last year. We saw some good offense throughout the year, and we could see maybe if Kellen Moore, year 2 into that system, year 2 of kind of being the OC, working with Mike McCarthy, can develop a unique or even at least just explosive offense. They were an explosive offense last year, and I think they wanted to keep going in that direction. So Mike McCarthy's coming in with a whole new analytical model, right? He put his year off into perspective. He said, you know what, I'm going to take a year off, spend some time with some family, but not only that, I'm going to get into some, like, what's the analytics stuff that we need to do. So I like the Mike McCarthy hire. I think I've been open about it. I was a big fan of Mike McCarthy going into the offseason as far as coaching hires, so I think that worked out. Then we got to the real offseason. Free agency happened. They franchise tagged Dak, right? So they're like, because they couldn't come to terms with Dak Prescott. They signed Amari Cooper, $20 million average annual a year deal. So a $100 million deal, big deal for a receiver. But I think Amari Cooper has shown that he's a good receiver in the NFL. Whether you think that is the value that they should have put as far as that contract, it's questionable for some people. I can totally understand either way. I think there's a good argument to be made that, listen, receivers are gold, and when you have a really good one that changes your offense like Amari Cooper did for the Dallas Cowboys, it makes sense. So they also signed some D-linemen, right? They signed Gerald McCoy. They signed Aldon Smith. They signed Dontari Poe, right? They did a whole bunch of deals last year going into the season. They signed Ronald Leary to an extension. They extended Jalen Smith, their linebacker. So they have an interesting linebacking core They kept a lot of the offensive line together. Right tackle, not Ronald, Lale Collins. Sorry, I got him confused with the guy who he swapped in for a few years ago. Lale Collins, the right tackle, he's going to be there for the long term. So they kept one part of the offensive line together. Unfortunately, Travis Fredrick retired. If you've been keeping up, that's kind of sad. You're losing a major big player that's on your offensive line, an all-pro center. He even played really well this year, but he said, listen, dealing with Guillain-Barré syndrome, he just can't do it and feel like he's doing his best. So they lose a major piece to their offensive line. That might affect them going into the draft this week, right? They might say, listen, we lost a center. Maybe they feel good about Connor McGovern. Different Connor McGovern than the one the Jets signed away from the Broncos. There seems to be a lot of Connor McGoverns just wandering around here. They also got Connor Williams, a lot of Connors on the O-line, who's going to be playing played left guard for him last year. And they got Looney, who not great. He spot started for them, and honestly, he didn't play really well for them when he played in for Travis Fredrick. But they have pieces there, so there might not be pushed to go ahead and replace Travis Fredrick in the first round, especially because there might not be a true All-Pro center in the first round, although there's probably one that I like. And we'll get to him in a second. They for defense coordinator, right? They got Mike Nolan to sign on with Mike McCarthy. That was kind of his pick. They lost Byron Jones, right? They also cornerback, safety. You started out as safety in the NFL for the Cowboys. Now he's playing cornerback. Plays really well at cornerback. Got one of the biggest deals in free agency by going to Miami. So they lost him to Miami Dolphins, who we're talking about later on. They lost Travis Fredrick to retirement. They lost Robert Quinn to the Chicago Bears. But don't worry, folks. They're going to replace Robert Quinn with an interesting combination of D linemen, right? They got 2 D tackles in free agency, Dontari and Gerald McCoy. Those I don't think he's really being replaced. I think they're more replacing Malik Collins, who also left. He went to the Raiders with Jeff Heath and Jason Witten. They also signed Aldon Smith, who is potentially coming back to the NFL after being indefinitely suspended and been out of the league for the last 4 years. And they got news that they might get Randy Gregory back. So that he might get reinstated this year. So that's a lot of pieces that are all kind of floating out there that it might make it a good D-line, it might make it a meh D-line. So there's a lot of questions surrounding this defensive line, especially with Robert Quinn playing so well on that defense. They just weren't able to keep him. He went to the Chicago Bears. Cam Flemung, offensive tackle, reserve tackle, decided to go to the New York Giants, follow Jason Garrett over to the Big Apple. Jeff Heath, their strong safety, along with Malik Collins, their D tackle, along with Jason Witten, signed up to join up with the Raiders and be like, yo, we're going to join the Raiders and we're going to go hang out with the Raiders. So, yeah, that's another team that they decide to hang out with and go, so, okay, let's use a bunch of players. Ways you can fix it, you get some cheap pickups, right? Dontari Poe, Gerald McCoy, good cheap pickups. I think the big worry going into this year is you have Dak Prescott on the franchise tag, who hasn't signed his tender yet, who sounds like he's going to at least not show up for any of the virtual minicamp because of COVID. So he's at least going to stay out of that. He might refuse to show up again, we don't know when they're actually going to get on the field, if there's going to be a season next year, what they're going to physically do, how all it's going to be handled. Looking into this year, if this was a normal year, it might be a little bit more worrisome because you're talking about a leader on the field who's not going to be there, right? You need to get your practice reps in with your quarterback. If he's not showing up, it might cause a bit of a headache. So if this was a normal year, I'd say this is a bigger deal because of COVID and the weird offseason. I don't know if it will be. You're going to have more of a virtual OTA situation. But you make money off of OTAs, but he still hasn't signed the tender, so he's kind of in this, they can't find him for not showing up. We're going to get into some of that as far as the new CBA and how the tenders, how the holdouts are going to be affected with the new CBA as far as accruing years and stuff like that. Probably not today, but I do think it's an important thing to go over. So the Dallas Cowboys, have a lot of weird spots that are kind of you don't feel horrible about any specific position, right? except maybe one, and I'll get into that. But D-line, I feel decent about. If they got another piece there, I feel really good about it. Offensive line, not for nothing. They still have Tyron Smith. They still have Leo Collins. They still have Zach Martin, all-pro right guard Zach Martin. So with all those pieces there, and you're hoping Connor Williams takes a step forward, and you're hoping maybe the guy that you drafted a year or two ago takes a step forward, maybe you draft a guy in the third or fourth round in this draft, potentially you might be okay at the offensive line. So I don't feel horrible. I don't feel like it's a thing that they have to run after and go get the top guy for, but it is one of those things, every position group seems kind of a little bit questionable, right? Tight end, who's playing tight end for them? Blake Jarwin again? I don't know. Is he even on the team? Linebacker is an interesting spot for them. They got Sean Lee coming back for like a $4 million deal. They got Leighton Vander Esch, but he's kind of got neck issues. And then they also have Jalen Smith, who they gave a big deal to last year. And there might be some questions as to whether they liked that deal or not. So that's, again, another position where you're looking at it and you're going, all right, I don't think they're drafting linebacker. I think they might avoid linebacker. They might take someone on like a little bit later, but I don't think they're jumping after linebacker this year. I don't see that being part of their scheme, their strategy, if you will. Safety, there's some good players. Xavier Woods I like as far as their safeties go, but they could still use a little bit of adding to that safety room. Receiving corps, Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper have been good, but everybody else is kind of not special. They lost Randall Cobb to free agency. He went over to the Texans, so he just went like down the street. I don't know. I actually don't know how far Texas is from Dallas, Texas is from Houston, Texas. Probably might be a little bit further than down the street. So there goes my Texas geography for you. Then so you have all these pieces that are like and then you also have the Dak Prescott issue. You paid your running back last year, Zeke Elliott. What do you need going into this draft? Well, they lost Byron Jones, who was their best corner. They just did not budget out for him, right? This is a team that tends to budget out a few years in advance to keep a guy. They didn't keep the guy. So you don't have Byron Jones. You still have Chidobe Awuzie and Jordan Lewis. They might come on a little bit better. I liked Chidobe Awuzie coming out. He's played pretty well. Jordan Lewis has been a pretty decent slot guy. Not amazing, not great, but they still need another outside corner. There's a lot of guys that are still out there in free agency, so maybe after the draft they look to grab a guy. They have about $13 million in available cap space. And you can always kind of open up more cap space and stuff like that. But going into the draft, they have about $13 million, give or take, that's available to them to utilize to improve the roster. So they might go ahead and utilize that money to play around with. And never know. If they get a deal done with Dak Prescott, that might open up a little bit of cap space here or there, some wiggle room. So as far as the position groups, I feel cornerback's the one if I was going on that team, I'd be like, yo, we don't got anybody. We got like two guys we think we're decent with. They're like league average corners, can be pretty good. Okay safety room, decent D-line. And it's like, well, what do you value? Do you value, man coverage and trying to blitz? This all comes down to what Carroll wants to do, what Mike Carroll wants to do going into this year. Mike Nolan, sorry, everybody. I get Mike Nolan, Nolan Carroll in my head. I just did the Mike Nolan, everybody, is the defensive coordinator. So anyway, in this draft, there is a good amount of corners in this draft, right? Pass rush is not great, right? We're going to talk a little bit about the defensive players on tomorrow's episode going into this year. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to do my final mock draft going into the year. And then we'll see where we go with this. So defensive there's going to be some interesting players for defense at 17, which is where they pick in the first round. Corner, very deep, but kind of interesting deep. Like, it's not, there's like two guys who are really good, and then a bunch of guys kind of like the year Chidobe Awuzie came out, where there's like two guys that were really great, and everybody else is kind of interesting question marks. So you might get a good guy in the second round or third round. Pass rush is weird this year. The Kayvon Chason, AJ Epinesa, those are kind of the guys you're looking at in that area. If Javon Kinlaw fell, but again, like this is not a team that's typically drafted D tackles very high, at least not in recent years. So I don't think they're drafting a running back. That's the only spot I don't see them ever really paying attention to. There's a lot of good receivers in this draft. I could see them maybe saying, hey, we need to shore up our receiving core. So that might be the choice of them, if you will. So I truly do believe that the Dallas Cowboys have like that league average team, and they could take a step forward and be amazing, or they could whiff it this year and be stuck 2 years behind, if you will. And part of that has to do with their situation at each of these positions, where they're like, even their best strength, they really can only build on so much. There might be like a Cesar Ruiz at 17. Are you going to take him in the first round? You're going to take a center in the first round who has very good qualities. I'm not quite sure he's all-pro center. So is that what you're going to take in the first round, or are you going to try to rebolster your defense? A lot of questions going into this year with the Dallas Cowboys. This team could easily be back in the playoffs this year, or they could easily be back in the top 5 like they were when the year they drafted Zeke Elliott. So what are we going to do? What are they going to do? Right? Maybe one of these deep receivers like I was talking about the other day. They're going to go, running back, meh. D tackles or some. Edge rushers, I'm not too happy. But what about another team? Let's talk about another East Coast team, although I don't understand how Dallas is considered East, but another East team, the Miami Dolphins. Hang on one second. I almost drank the microphone, everybody. Yes, I just had a little bit of water. That's how I use my English. Anyway, we're going to talk about the Miami Dolphins next, right? This team has so many picks. First off, let's get into everybody thought they were tanking last year, right? Tanking for Tua. They had 2 horrible games at the beginning of the season. They had a new head coach in Brian Flores. They had a new manager in Chris Greer. They thought Brian Flores was just going to be in here to like hang out to dry, that he was going to be a scapegoat. Well, scapegoat him, he did not let them do, because they went on a run at the end of the year, right? 5 out of 7 games at the end of the year that they won. They showed that they were willing to play hard and try to win games. I like it. I like what I saw from Brian Flores' team. They picked up. They went from a team that had 40, 50 points thrown on for the first 2-3 weeks to a team that at least held up in a couple of tough contests. So, including beating the Patriots. So, going into this year, they've got Chan Gailey as their new offensive coordinator coming out of retirement, so that their guy can go join up and be on their current offensive coordinator got to leave. Josh Boyer ended up going from passing game coordinator to defensive coordinator. Although, let's be real, Brian Flores being a former defensive coordinator, former DC of the Patriots, and linebackers coach, he's probably calling a lot more of the defensive plays there. But let's talk about what they did in free agency, because I think that's what we all want to talk about, right? They had a healthy free agency, if you will. We talked before. They signed Byron Jones of the Dallas Cowboys. They have a very expensive back end now, right? They got Xavier Howard, one of the highest paid corners in the NFL. They also now have Byron Jones as a corner at $17 million a year. Two of the top 3 paid corners in the NFL. That's pretty good. Your outside coverage is going to be amazing. So you got your lockdown corners. You got 2 great lockdown corners. Now it's filling out the rest of the defense you got to worry about, right? They had a couple of guys that played pretty good on defense last year. They liked a couple of their linebackers. Jerome Baker played pretty well. But they went ahead and they signed a few guys in free agency. Kyle Van Noy they signed, a pass rushing linebacker, strong side linebacker. Who knows what he's going to be playing in their defense? It could be playing, be rushing up the middle. This is a very Patriot-style defense, if you will. So Kyle Van Noy gets signed. They signed a couple of offensive linemen, because if there was a giant weakness on this team, it was the offensive line. They still didn't sign any tackles, though. Well, they signed one guy who was a former tackle, Mr. Eric Flowers. They also they signed Ted Karras of the New England Patriots, so to be a center, if they're going to utilize him at center. $4 million, not a heavy deal. I'll tell you this much: the Flowers deal was a little bit pricier. I think it was 3 years, $10 million. Manuel Ogbo was signed for a bit of money. Not a lot. Again, a lot of these deals were in that $8 to $10 million range. Shaq Lawson, 3 years, $10 million. So they got 2 ends, 2 defensive ends, a linebacker, a couple of offensive linemen, Clayton Fredrick, the safety. They even signed Jordan Howard, formerly of the Eagles and the Chicago Bears. So it seems like they're trying to go ahead and pull a bunch of pieces together to formulate a defense that will work for them, that can kind of again, cohesively work to what they want to go for. Brian Flores is getting his guys, right? He's going to get to walk into next year and be like, listen, I know how Van Noy works. I think I can get something out of Agba. I think I can get something out of Shaq Lawson. A lot of these D linemen that they have now, Christian Wilkins, Grossfar, whatever his name is, starts with a G, can't ever pronounce it. They got a lot of good run-stuffing D linemen. It sounds a lot like the Patriots, but then they also got a lot of good man corners. So what they're really probably planning to do is blitz a lot. That's what I see this team doing. I think they're going into the 2020 season to blitz. Blitz and blitz hard, if you will. I get it. I got it. It's good. They're saying we're going to cover you, and we're just going to go ahead and throw whatever we can at you. And I think it'll work. I think it's an interesting strategy. But they've got some weaknesses on the roster, right? Quarterback, right? They got Brian Fitzpatrick. They got Josh Rosen, the chosen one. Receiving core is interesting. Good 2 names on there that I like. Preston Williams played pretty well last year. Devontae Parker played pretty well last year. Had his breakout season finally after 9 years. Really, it's just 5. He's the thing was he was a hyped first-round pick. But, again, athletic freak, fun to watch. I honestly, he was always that guy, you're like, if he ever got it all together, he'd be amazing. And we kind of saw him get a lot of it together. Played really well with Fitzpatrick. So, I talked before about Chan Gailey. Chan Gailey had a couple of guys when he was with the New York Jets that were Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker, where he utilized these 2 giant slot receivers almost, basically. They were playing spread. They would have Marshall in the slot. They would have Decker in the slot. And it would make it very hard for teams to line up against them because you have these 2 big, athletic, dominating powerhouses of receivers. I loved watching when he was the Jets coordinator. He was a fun guy to, his first season there with Ryan Fitzpatrick. It was a fun team to watch. I thought he might be a good guy to have for Ryan Fitzpatrick with Preston Williams and Devontae Parker. They still need receivers, though. This team is a team that is not done with the receiving core, and they're certainly not done with the offensive line. They need tackles. They need maybe 2 tackles. They need to look and get 2 tackles in this draft, and they could probably do it. So, they traded away Laramie Tunsil last year, got a couple of picks for Laramie Tunsil. Good move. I liked it. I was a big fan of the move, especially when you're in this rebuild mode. And they still get another first and a second next year for this guy. This is amazing. This is the gift that keeps on giving for them. They might get a couple of tackles and still go into next year with so much extra capital. I like it. So Miami in this little bit of a rebuild mode, second shot, they're going into this draft. They've got a ton of picks, right? They still, by the way, all those signings, they still have $35 million in cap just for this year, right? That stuff's going to roll over to next year potentially, which I think that they'll probably save that to roll over so that they can get some more guys next year, kind of work on developing more of this team. Sounds great. They have 3 picks in the first round. They got pick 5, pick 18, pick 26. This is why I meant they are the bells of the ball in this year's NFL draft. They have a lot of picks. They've got a lot of stuff. They're walking into this year. They are not afraid. They got number 5 overall, 18 overall, 26th overall. They also got 2 picks in the second round, number 39 overall, number 56 overall, and they also have a high third-round pick. So I think they're going in here feeling very comfortable. They got a ton of picks. Multiple 5th-rounders this year, multiple 7th-rounders. So they're really going to get to have their pick of some deeper players in this draft, if you will. Guys who are falling, and the good thing with 5th and 7th-round picks is that you get that ability to jump up. Hey, we'll trade you a couple of 5th-rounders. We can get up and get your 4th or something. So it gives you the ability to be mobile in the draft. It doesn't mean you have to be stagnant because, the top 100 picks are where it really matters. And then, the 4th round's pretty decent. And once you get the 5th to 7th round, really those tickets are, hey, we're not really big fans of the guys that they have left here. Let us move back and, or move up and kind of utilize the ability to go up and down this draft. And I think this year the 7th-rounder picks are going to be, interesting picks. The 5th-round picks are going to be, hits that are going to last a lifetime because again, with COVID, a lot of guys are, they're going to stay away from red flags. They're going to trade down, get rid of picks this year for picks next year. There's going to be a market inefficiency this year that falls to like that 5th round, where those extra like 3 5th-round picks are going to be very useful. So I'm not going to be shocked when day 3 comes around and Miami walks out with a haul going into 2020 and 2021, if you will. So the big questions this year, right? Miami, they tank it for Tua. Tua gets hurt. They're not going to get Joe Burrow. We're going to talk about Joe Burrow, but I think we'll save Joe Burrow for last of all the quarterbacks. This is kind of why I wanted to marry this all together, because, like I said, I think if you want to pay attention to some of the tackle stuff, I did a tackle episode. There's going to be quite a few tackles in this draft. They probably have an opportunity to at least get one good tackle, and then maybe even a tackle on day 2 to throw on to that offensive line, because there's going to be guys maybe like Isaiah Wilson that maybe falls to the second. Who really is probably a day 2 guy, but he might not be there. But they might be able to get Lucas Niang, who played right tackle, who has some injury red flags. Again, with all these extra picks, you might be able to bolster up that offensive line, get Lucas Niang and Josh Jones, or Lucas Niang and Mekhi Becton. But let's talk about the 5th overall pick. The quarterbacks that might be there if they trade down. People are hearing trade down. They might go, that's a little interesting. But that could be on the table at 5 overall if somebody else wants a quarterback up there. If you're the Miami Dolphins, you built up all this capital, right? You're at 5th overall. Fitzpatrick's not really your future, but there's a lot of question marks outside of Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow has his own questions. But so there's Tua, right? Injury red flags, couple of high ankle sprains, and has again the hip issue, right? That was almost like they're saying like a car crash level injury. This guy does have a lot of injuries, right? He's not injury prone because they're not repetitive injuries. They're not showing that he's had, like, oh, this guy keeps tearing his meniscus. This guy's got bad knees. He's got an arthritic knee. He's going to keep going downhill. So he's not injury prone, but he is prone to injury by the way he plays. He tries to extend the play a little bit. He bounces around. He's not, he's when he does take a hit, he's not taking it the best way possible. So Tua is a very interesting prospect, right? Played for Alabama, had all these first-round picks around him. That's what everybody likes to talk about, is the first-round picks that were surrounding Tua. And not for nothing, it is a very good question. With all the first-round picks that were around him, did he have to have the hardest time playing? He very rarely had to go past his first read, and what some people have noticed is that when he had to go past his first read, when he had to make a second read throw, when he had to do some, actually had to make it through his progressions, he had a little bit less of a good time. But, he's still good at a lot of things, right? He's still got a good pocket presence, good pocket awareness, good arm, very accurate, knows how to throw a touch in anticipation. So the thing that I'm not always worried with reads, because it also might be the scheme that you are running. You can develop a way of, when a guy has a hard time with making it through progressions, it might be that he was never asked to do it. So that's really Tua's issue, right? It's not really asked to do it a lot, so you might have to develop it for him. Like you saw that a lot with Shaun Watson coming out of Clemson. That was a big question mark with him, along with a couple of other things. But that was like the biggest question mark was, can he make it in the NFL with multiple reads, and is he going to be able to do this? His real problem was the interceptions and decision-making in college, and for some reason it just turned out that he's been one of those guys that was a lot of people took knocks on, played a lot better. Tua has a lot of the similar qualities that Shaun Watson had. That's kind of the guy who I look at and go, that's your framework right there, except Tua is a hit away for, you don't know if he's playing next year. Get the injury red flags. You also have a question mark here with his hip, if it's going to be arthritic. They're saying there's going to at least be arthritis in his hip, a couple of years down the line. We're not talking all that far down the line. That's a big worry for a lot of teams. It's a big worry if you're drafting him at 5th overall. So with him, you have the hip issue. The necrosis setting in can still set in anywhere from 6 months to a year. So you might have a team that drafts him, and again, I'm not a doctor, so if they're so worried about the necrosis, and potentially setting in past now, right? That was actually the big question. This would probably be the target time for where they would start seeing it to set in, was about April. He hasn't really, you haven't been able to get your second checkup with the doctor, especially with, that's the other thing, is coronavirus has definitely hurt his stock as well. Did not expect this coming up. So you thought you'd have the second checkup with the doctor, get an MRI, and they'd be able to give him a clearance on it a little bit more. That's just not happened. Like I said, the things that I love about this guy, he's accurate. He can throw the ball really well, touch anticipation, has an NFL level arm. He's not the strongest arm in the world. I think that's kind of the differentiator. The top 4 quarterbacks, the day 1 quarterbacks, the top 2 do not have the strongest arms in the world, but they have NFL level arms. But they know how to throw a touch anticipation. They have good pocket awareness, and they know how to extend the play. I basically feel like Burrow and Tua have a lot of similarities as far as what they do well. I think the thing that Burrow does better is, A, he doesn't have the injury question mark, but also he makes it past his first. He had a lot more second, third read throws. His extending of the play was a little bit different. I felt like he was just a little bit different of the two, where I think that even if Tua was healthy, there is good argument as to why Burrow should go ahead of Tua. And I think I would still be Burrow ahead of Tua guy, even though Tua's done it longer, but Tua's also had shortened seasons because of injury, which, again, it's kind of a back and forth thing. Both those guys, accurate, good arms, but not elite level arms. The next 2 guys on the list, Herbert, who's potentially going to go ahead of Tua at 5 overall, for Miami, or whoever decides to pick very high. He might be the Justin Herbert of Oregon, who has a great arm, very athletic, but his problem's always been kind of accuracy, consistency. Again, he's got strong arm, he's a good athlete. I think he's a good rhythm and timing passer. Like, if you got him a coach, when the rumor was going around that, maybe the Bengals were more interested in Herbert, when that rumor was going around, there was a good idea here that he kind of fits in a Zach Taylor offense. He fits in a Kyle Shanahan offense, maybe, except for the issue of he has bad footwork. He has, not horrible, but his footwork is similar to Carson Wentz. There's a reason why you don't see Carson Wentz throw from under center a lot. So, like Carson Wentz, like a few other quarterbacks, you might see him more in a shotgun RPO kind of system, but where you have a little bit more rhythm and timing, a lot more deep shots. You're going to have to design an offense that works for him initially, utilizes athleticism. Like I said, really strong arm, and everybody's kind of pointed that one out. He has some, issues with short area throws. He has some issues making it through progressions. And like I said, his footwork gets a little messy sometimes. So you're going to have questions as to whether he can do a full scheme like a Kyle Shanahan drop-back scheme where he's got to take the ball under center and then throw it. And he's always had kind of consistency issues. Him and the next guy have had some consistency question marks. Jordan Love, Utah State, kind of the next guy down, 4th quarterback on the list. He could easily go in the top 10. He could easily go at the end of the first round. And the things that you see with him are he's got a strong arm. He's athletic. He's kind of in the Josh Allen spectrum. But he has issues when it comes to decision-making, reads. He stares down his receiver. With those kind of issues, you have a question as to whether he can make it in the NFL. He's more, you get this kind of hearing of, is this guy going to be more athlete than quarterback? And, usually it has been used in the past to go ahead and degrade some players. But I'm saying this as in, like I said, he's in the Josh Allen spectrum, right? He is athlete, strong arm. If you can design a scheme that works for him, you can get him especially if you can get him with a good coach, good scheme that works around what his strengths are, and maybe let him sit for at least like a good first half of the season, get him some developmental time, he can become at least somewhat, there's some hope that he could be Pat Mahomes. I don't think he is there, because there's stuff that Pat Mahomes has shown when he was coming out that showed that, listen, sometimes Pat Mahomes would throw an interception, but his point was, listen, we had to throw 500 yards a game because we had no defense. really wasn't the same thing with Utah State. So he, there's certain questions that you would have of these players that you just won't be able to answer, right? And you want to ask them of everybody. Joe Burrow, why is he only had one good year? And part of that was the offense at LSU wasn't really great for a quarterback its first year, but then Joe Brady comes in, right? Like I said, Joe Burrow reminds me of, and I think a lot of people said Tony Romo, right? Tony Romo's the perfect comp for him. Not the strongest arm in the world, but good decision maker, cerebral, knows if he understands and knows the offense, which he showed that he can pick up an offense pretty well. And he played in an NFL style offense. He shows that he can he can make the progressions, make the reads, extend the play, keep the game script going, and just try to keep playing. And that was kind of like what Tony Romo was when he was in the NFL. He was good at he was weirdly athletic. He wasn't great. He wasn't Lamar Jackson, but what he was is he had good pocket awareness. Some of that was developmental, right? He didn't come into the league like that. He had good 3 years of playing as being an undrafted free agent, being a backup, and then starting to play. He had that, and he got to develop and learn how to be a quarterback in the NFL. Joe Burrow has a lot of those same things, but he hasn't had to be a backup for 3 years as an undrafted free agent. He has that awareness, that ability, that touch, that the ability to throw the ball and throw it exactly where it needs to be, great accuracy, and he played, an NFL-style offense, and that's something that is very unique to Joe Burrow that maybe not every single player of these top 4 quarterbacks gets to do. So, Burrow, your question is, what happened at Ohio State that you couldn't get on the field? What happened between year 1 and year 2? These are just questions you'd want to ask. Tua, the hip, making it to second reads, reading a defense, which I think you can develop that. That's not the things that he does really well are the things that I worry about more. The things like pocket presence, accuracy, touch, mobility, those things you can't teach, and he does it really well. Herbert, there's a little bit, I know there's some not character as in like red flag character, but character as in like, is this guy a leader, or is he or is he lead through example? How does he do it? And that's usually been the big question mark with Herbert. And then trying to get down, like, can he, again, same issues that everybody coming into the NFL has. Can you read an offense? Can we design something for you? And with Jordan Love, it's trying to figure out, can he develop into that next level guy, right? So those are the top 4 guys. There's also 3 day 2 guys that I think are interesting. Everybody's probably talked about them already. Jalen Hurts, athletic, played for Oklahoma, played for Alabama. A lot of people, and including me, have kind of compared him to Tyrod Taylor. I like that comp. I think it's, and you can design an offense that works for him. I think that he's not Lamar Jackson, but he has that thing of, if you design some of these guys, you just got to design something for them that makes them work. But he has the same issues that Tyrod has. If his first or second read's not there, he might duck his head and run. He's a guy who you want to draft and kind of have sit for a season or so and kind of learn the offense. Then there's Jake Fromm, who, took a huge step back in 2019. Like, I don't think it's talked about enough. I think people just thought he went like lateral, and they were like, well, he just didn't develop. No, he took a step back as well, and I think part of it was the weapons weren't there anymore. But still, like, his accuracy is pretty good. He's gonna take a step in the NFL, and he could start right away. He's gonna be more of the Alex Smith kind of guy. He's gonna be more in that Cody Kessler, Alex Smith range of player, where really what you're counting on is short area accuracy, keeping the ball moving, ball control. And if he lands with the right team, it might not be a bad deal. But he's not going to be the driver of the offense as much as a player in the offense, if you will. And then there's Jacob Eason, Washington, another big arm guy, more developmental, going to probably go on like day 2 somewhere. And you just didn't see enough stuff from him to make you go, I want this guy as my quarterback. Again, these 7 guys are probably all going on the first 2 days of the draft. As far as who should go to Miami, it depends on what your question is as far as injury goes, right? If you are the no risk it, no biscuit guy, you might go Tua. If you feel like, hey, listen, I just got to get somebody back there who I could develop, But then you realize, like, they have Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen went, like, top 15 2 years ago, and he's been on 2 different teams. So, I don't know. This is a very, very unique year in the NFL draft. You're not getting the opportunity to go ahead and see what the medicals on Tua more than you would. You're not getting to bring these guys in and get them on the chalkboard and, see them do progressions. So, I'm not quite sure what I would do if I was Miami. Honestly, I'd probably trade back, try to get as many picks as possible, and next year have like 30 first-round picks if that was available to me. And then take a guy like on day 2. That would be an opportunity. I don't know if that's necessarily the smart thing, but it is an interesting idea, especially if you're worried about Tua and his hip. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. If you want, you can follow the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO, Death is in the End of Life. Punch, like a delicious drink on a nice summer day. And if you want, you can follow, honestly, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, like it, leave a comment. And then if you're listening to this on the iTunes, right, leave a review, say that you love us. Again, subscribe, make it auto-download, do whatever you can to support the pod. And thank you. And we will be back. We'll be here this week. We're doing live streams. We're doing a live stream broadcast on Thursday and Friday on the draft nights, if you will. Take care.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.